To begin, let's learn the basics of rigid body dynamics setup in Motion Builder. Simply said, rigid body dynamics is just a way of getting the computer to generate animation on your objects based on physical forces and rules. This is done with just movement or translation and rotation of the objects. No scaling or deformation effects occur during rigid body dynamics. So if you want to set rigid body dynamics up in Motion Builder, you need three elements in your scene. You need the object that's going to be simulated, or that's going to have the animation on it. You're going to need a rigid body physical property applied to that said object. And finally, you're going to need a physical solver asset. This is the piece that takes your rigid bodies and crunches the formula out to basically get your animation. So let's see how we can get these going. I don't have an object in this empty scene right now, so I'm going to target a simple primitive. We'll be using the asset browser, so pull that up. Let's go to the templates, elements, let's go to the primitives folder, and you can use any object of your choice really. In this case, let's try and go for something simple and use a primitive like a torus, for example. So let's grab the torus, left click, drag and drop it over onto the viewer, and now we'll have an itty bitty torus in here that we can basically work with. Now, by itself, it's not going to have any rigid body properties associated with it, so you need to make sure that you apply the rigid body physical property to your object if you want them to be simulated. So to do this, we go back to our asset browser, and this time we target the physical properties folder. In here, we can create ragdolls or rigid bodies. In this case, we're going to go for a rigid body, so grab the rigid body asset, drag and drop it over, and drop it onto the torus. Now, this will basically take your torus and attach a rigid body to it. And you can also take a look at these rigid bodies in the help of the new physical properties folder that was just added. If you open that up, your rigid bodies are stacked in here. Now, you'll have a whole bunch of properties that you can alter to change the way your rigid body dynamics work, and we'll take a look at those in a little bit. For now, let's just focus on flushing out the rest of the pipeline. Now, we have almost all the elements there. We just need the third piece, which is the physics solver asset, and this is located in the solvers folder of the asset browser. Simply grab the physics solver asset, left click, drag and drop it to any empty area of the viewer. And now this will drop in a new solvers folder with the physics solver on the inside. And now we have a bunch of different properties and buttons we can click on here to get the simulation going. I'm going to have to take my navigator and expand it out a little bit so we can see some of the other actions in here. Alright, so now nothing's going to happen and our simulation will not be active until the solver is turned on. The way you turn on the physics solver is with the help of the online property right here. We can just take it and change it from red to green by clicking on it, meaning that now the physics solver will be active and set to solve your rigid bodies so they can move around and be affected by forces and collisions. Now by default, we actually have gravity being applied onto our objects. So if we were to start the simulation at this point, this torus over here is going to fall down. To start your simulation, there are a couple of ways of doing it, but the best one is to actually preview it by turning on live. So if you go to your physics solver, you can check on live, and this will basically activate your simulation. The torus falls down, and the simulation will keep solving until it reaches a good stopping point. Now, the simulation is still active, so if you want it to restart, you just need to click on the reset to start button. Left click on it, and now the torus goes back to the position at which it's first started at, and that's called the initial state or the start state. Basically, with the start state, it's always set the moment you turn online on or off, so that's something you want to be very conscious of. If you take online and turn it off right now, this is going to become the new start state once we start it up again. No matter how many times I click on reset to start, the torus is going to be down here because when we activated the solver, that's where the system saw it at, and it said, you know what, since it's placed right here on the ground, let's make that the new start state. So you want to be conscious of turning online on or off, because that can greatly affect where the starting point of your simulation is going to be. And with that, we're basically taking a quick look at how to set up the physics or the rigid bodies within Motion Builder. It's a simple process. Get an object, drop in a physical property that's the rigid body onto your surface, drop in a solver, and then simply go ahead and activate the solver, and you can preview your results with the help of live. The neat thing is that once you're in live mode, you can grab your object, move it around, and when you deselect it, the simulation will begin and it'll become active. In the next lesson, we'll take a look at how we can take this simulation information and actually store it as keyframes in the transport controls.